got here is a Genome Decor XL5018. And for sewing purposes, there's things you look out before you actually start sewing. One is the thread. To make sure you got a good thread or a bad thread, if you take about 6 inches of thread, put it together like that, that's fine. If you got threads that curl up like this, occasionally that might get caught up somewhere or give you issues. So watch how much spin you have. If you got I generally like 100% polyester, something that's really consistent and smooth. One of the things I look for in thread is if it's an older thread that has the nick to it, you always keep the nick to the back on this machine, okay, so that the thread doesn't come around and catch. Some of these newer spools that look like this lid actually comes off and you can end up putting your thread in there, okay. To thread your machine, okay, first of all, we're going to wind a bobbin. We wind a bobbin, you can watch in here. I put this on here. I'm going to put this cap on. These bigger caps are also to help prevent so it doesn't catch on the edge. And on here you have a little tension that goes around here. It goes around there, and what you do is you put your bobbin on. Let me get a bobbin. And I use these metal bobbins, and I put this on here. I put this on here, and then what I end up doing is I just wrap it, break it off, tighten it. I push this in. The minute I push this in, let's turn it on, it disengages the machine and you're only winding a bobbin. Okay? And then once you're finished, you take it off, you pull it off, you break it. Okay. To thread the machine, there's two ways you can thread your machine. One way is my little secret. There's a couple of variables to it. Is if I break off my old thread and I take my new thread and I tie these two things together, make a nice little knot. Okay, this is a little secret over 40 years in many factories. Then I take a pair of snips that I'm trying to find somewhere. Right here. Take a pair of snips, I'll cut off this excess. Okay? Then I lift up this presser foot with this lever here. There's a little lever. Yeah. I lift it up. When I lift that up, the tension actually opens up. Okay, so now my tension is open. And then what I do is I will take my thread above the eye and I pull the whole thread down until I get the knot to the eye. The minute I get the knot to the eye, I put my foot down, depending on what needle's in here. I take my finger and I hold that needle firm. And if I'm lucky, sometimes it'll end up just pulling right through. And I don't know. Don't force it if it doesn't, but yeah, you got to use a size 14 needle. You'll be able to pull it through. Okay? To thread the machine normally, what I do is I put my foot down. I want my tension closed. But you hold the thread firmly with one hand. It goes into here. So you got tension when you're doing it. You pull down, and it goes up, and then you put it into the take-up lever. The minute you get it into this lever, you pull on it. I want you to pull on that and feel how much tension you have on there. Pull, pull. You can feel it. Your particular machine, number 3, 4, 5 is highlighted, okay, and you're generally going to be in that range. I want you to pull on the bobbin one and feel how much tension you have on that one. Okay, so the top one is about 2.5 times tighter than the top, or the top thread is 2.5 times tighter than the bottom. Okay, then you go down, you put your foot down, you go into here, and you got a thread guide here, and then your needle. On a needle, there's a flat side. Okay, flat side of the needle has to go to the back, and the needle has to go all the way up. Okay, once it's all the way up, you pinch it. On the opposite side of the flat side, the needle's actually a long groove. You can put your fingernail in there. Okay, and you can always feel that there's a groove in there. And then when you thread your needle, you do have a needle threader on here. Automatic needle threader. In order to do that, you make sure your needle bar is all the way up. You pull this down, this goes into the back thing here, this goes up, and then it pulls the thread into the needle in the back. Okay, but your needle bar has to be up. A lot of people always have problems with it because the little pin sometimes bends. So in order to thread your needle normally, what you do is take it here, you cut a clean edge. You have that long groove that's in the needle, okay, and what I do is I take the thread, I put it into that long groove, I slide it down until I get a little bit of it into the needle, and then I pull it straight up. Your bobbin goes like this. P for Peter. You see the letter P? You drop Peter in. I'm Peter there. You take your finger, you put it onto your bobbin case, you hold it there, and you just pull it forward. You take this thread here, you leave it loose, you rotate it till you pick up the thread so it catches, and then you take both threads, both there, and you put it onto here. Okay? Then you do have a tension set screw on your bobbin case, but once it's set, it's normally set. I don't recommend putting thick threads and thin threads on the same bobbin case because sometimes the thick thread will stretch the spring and you might find you might have to adjust that. I always recommend having a separate bobbin case for your heavier threads. You put it down here, you put it down here, and then you start to sew. Push on the valve. That sound nice? There. Okay. Two things you look for when you start to sew. One of the things you look for is your stitch length, how big those stitches are. My rule of thumb is when I look at something I'm going to sew, I'm going to ask myself, how easy is that for me to pick apart? Because the bigger the stitch, the smaller, the easier it is to pick apart. However, with bigger stitches, it's hard to make some turns. So when you try to make some turns on this, you can always go down to a smaller stitch, make your turn, and then put it back up to where you normally like it. Okay? The second thing I look for is tension. You take a look at your top, and you take a look at your bottom. And tension works like this. If you imagine the thickness of that fabric is the thickness here. Here's your top thread, here's your bottom thread. If you start seeing little tiny loops on the bottom, you would tighten the top, go to a higher number. That pulls the knot up. If you start seeing knots on the top, right, before you adjust this, check your bobbin case, make sure it didn't come unthreaded. And then if you have to, then you can loosen off the top if you want, or tighten the bottom depending on what you want. Okay, a lot of operators have this habit. When they're finished sewing, what they do is they put their needle up, they lift up the foot, they pull a really long strand, and the reason why they pull a long strand is I put this down here, and if I start pulling on the thread, it'll pull the thread out of the needle. Okay, so the secret there is whenever you finish sewing, you never put your needle all the way up. You always make sure your take-up lever is up. You got a lever here. Make sure that's all the way up, and then that's all the way up. You can take this, you can cut it about 1 inch, and then you can start to sew, and it'll start sewing. Or if you're going to look at the needle, it's not needle all the way up, it's needle up and starting to come down. Give it that extra little quarter turn, starts to come down, your take-up will be at the top. Okay, next thing you have on this machine is, I want you to lift up the foot, okay, Sadie, you're in the way there, and put it down. Okay, now lift up the foot. I have a dial up here. Okay, so you can feel the different pressure, right? Okay, so normally you're going to be sitting on number 2, right? And the reason why you have that is if you're going to go over something that's got a heavy bump to it, right, you can take the pressure off the foot and it'll roll over that bump easier. If you got light fabric and it puckers, you can always put more pressure on the foot to hold it. Okay, and on the particular dial, you notice you're going to got 3, 2, 1, and 1. And if you take a feel on 1, I want you to lift up 1 right now. Lift it up. You can feel it's really loose, right?
Yeah.
On the back of this machine, over here, there's a little switch. Okay, and this is my teeth here, my feed dogs, right? Right? If I take this switch, I can drop my teeth down, and now suddenly I got no feeding, right? And when I got no feeding, why would I want no feeding? Because I can do some darning with it. So what I end up doing is I drop my teeth, I take all the pressure off the foot, right? And I'm on straight sew, right? I'm on straight sew. Now I can darn by pulling up. Okay? And when you're finished, you pull that lever back, push this back on number 2, and then it'll kick in and start sewing again. Okay? A lot of people don't know that's there. Okay. Next thing. Okay. Next thing here is, okay, on this particular machine, you're going to take a look that you got these different codes here. You got A, B, C, and D, and that's with your stitch regulator, okay?
Yeah.
So if you end up turning it to, and this will give you an indication what number things should be on, right? 0, over, left, right, right? And yours is pretty easy. So if you go to this A, now anything that is wide, on here you want to put this is your stitch width, you want to put your stitch width on wide, and then you're going to get that particular pattern. Okay? Alright, you take your particular pattern. So let's turn this back to normal, which is straight sew, which is A is number 1. Okay, so your dials are stitch width, stitch length, and you pick whatever pattern you want, and that's what you got. And anything that's wide, you're going to make it wide.
Okay.
Now, do you have a buttonhole foot? Because you have a buttonhole feature on here. There you go. Yes, you do. And it's a good buttonhole foot. Oh, you got it like this. Okay. So this is your buttonhole attachment. Take this off. Take it up. Okay, this is your buttonhole attachment. In here, this opens up and closes. So what you can actually do is take your button, not a bobbin, but you can take your button and say that's the size that I want.
Right.
Okay? You have a little button on the back of this foot. Okay? Okay, take that out. Little button on the back of the foot, you drop it. It has a little bar there and it has a little bar here. It's the same thing here, you have a little bar on here. So we take this and we put that onto the bar. Make sure your threads aren't caught. And we drop it down. Hit that button again, make sure it's all the way in. I can tell this has never been used, that part of it. Then you take this and you put it onto buttonhole. Okay, it automatically sets it and it'll tell you what range you should be sitting in when you're doing a buttonhole. On your stitch length, I would probably put it to where number 1 is, at the end of the buttonhole. And your stitch width here, you can set it anywhere between 4, 5, and 6. Then you take it and you put your material down. You have a little lever here that pulls out, that pulls down. That goes behind that little apparatus. And then you start sewing a buttonhole and it'll do the buttonhole. It'll automatically do the length of buttonhole that you want. Okay, and when you're finished, you lift it up. Needle coming down, you lift up, and then you have your buttonhole. And then you end up cutting out the hole that you want.
Right.
If you want to make it tighter on the sides, all you got to do is adjust your stitch length on your buttonhole there. If you want to make another one, if you're going to make another buttonhole, what you have to do is you have to do a reset. It says R, right? So a reset is going off of it and then back onto it, and then it'll do your second one. It won't do it unless you have a reset to it. Okay, needle up, coming down. There. Okay, and when you're finished, you hit the button, the buttonhole foot comes down, you take your lever, you push it back up there, put it back to A, put your stitch length what you prefer. I kind of like 2.5 myself. On this machine that goes there. On this apparatus here, you'll see that it says a plus and a minus down here, and this represents a buttonhole. What this will do is balance out how even it is on both sides. Normally that's going to be straight up when you end up doing the buttonhole foot. And then we end up putting this down here. Okay, also, let's take a look at what attachments you got. So that was your buttonhole attachment. Easy there, let's see. Okay. I'm going to save the best for the last, okay? Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom. And this. Everybody always wonders what that is. Okay. First of all, I'm going to change feet. So I lift it up. Make sure that's tight there. Hit that. Drop off my regular foot. Notice you got two types of feet. One's clear, one's plastic. This is not your regular foot. If you try to use this on light fabric, you're going to find you're going to get puckering because it has a gap there. This is if you're sewing over any bumps on one side, you put the bump through. Or if you got fabric that is difficult to sew on, it's got little skid marks. It makes it a little bit easier. But this is the normal one that you're going to end up using. This one here is an edge guide, and if you look at it carefully, it's got 2 pins to it. Now, because it's got 2 pins, you want to make sure you do a zigzag on this thing, nothing else, because you don't want the needles to hit that. So you take your machine, you put it on a zigzag, and you put it on the widest. Right? Put this down on top. Okay. And then you let me grab another piece of fabric so we can see what it does here. Okay. Anytime you sew, always try out your machine before you go on to your project. If the machine works good on your project, on the scrap material that you try, then go on to your project. There's no sense starting and having problems on your, and then you're going to rip your pattern apart, right? If that made any sense, it's mumble jumble here. So on this particular foot, I got someone else waiting in there. I'm a busy guy. You have a little guide here. You see that guide there? You take this and you put it up and underneath here. Okay? Then you take your fabric. Let's say I'll sew it down this way. Okay? You put your guide right on the edge of that fabric. Okay, when you're folding it, you put it on wide zigzag, right? And then you start to sew. Here, and what you're going to get, it cleans up your edge. Beautiful. It's like a serger, but it's not truly a serger, okay? It'll clean up your edge.
Okay, so I'm a quilter for kids, so I would use this, right?
Yeah, you could use that, but I'm going to show you another one that you'll end up using a lot better. That's your quilt foot there. Okay, next thing is, I think I ran out of bobbin. Did I run out of bobbin? Yes, I did. I always notice I run out when I need it. What did I do with that other one? Here, I only put a few spools on it, but let's try this one here. So, Murphy's Law here. Okay, where's the... There we go. We're going to wind another bobbin. I'll make it easy here. That one I didn't put too much on here. Put this in here, put this in here. Wrap. Take it, put it in.
So I'm using the machine because you don't see the thread when you're sewing.
What's that?
It's at the top, the thread. Usually you can see it, so it's like hidden away.
Yeah. Or you can sew with this up.
Yeah.
Anytime you have any problems with your machine, the very first place you look at is your thread, threading, needle, and bobbin case. Okay, that's enough. Break that off there, P for Peter. Put it in there. And I'll get that after. Take my 2 thread. Oh, I think she's...
I'm sorry, I don't
No, we're... I want to do this anyway. Here. Did I tie a knot? Or did I not? Yes, I did. Take it, snip off the excess. Oh, there we go. Just take it, lift up my foot, pull it all through, put it down, and then we'll end up threading the needle. There. And to thread the needle, I got a nice clean edge. Take it, find the groove, slide it down the groove until you get a little bit of an eye, and then you're going to make sure you got a clean edge, and this isn't that clean. Put it through, take your other finger, put it through. Okay, and then pick up the thread, it picks up the thread, and you put your foot under, and I always recommend always putting a little drop of oil around the bobbin case area just before you start, and then you settle it up. Okay, your next one you have here is a zipper foot, and you can put this on either side, left side, right side, and you're going to be on straight sew only. When you're doing a zipper, you put it on there, you run your zipper right up along the edge of this thing, and it'll sew a zipper. And then you can take it and you can move it to the other side and do the other side as well. Okay. Next thing you have here, I'll put this cover on here. There's one here. Next thing you have here, if you're a quilter and you want to do something fine, this particular foot has a little adjustment on here, right? You can adjust this guide, and that's a little tiny guide. So if I want to put this down here, put it on here, my foot is on, and on your machine here, you got left, center, right? Yeah, I think you do. Okay, can you move this up? Yeah, you can. Okay. So what you do is you take your fabric and you put it along the edge of this guide here. All right, and this will help you go nice and straight. And my foot pedal, and I fold this down, and it's going to go nice and straight. Now, this will give me a certain seam allowance area, so I'm sewing nice and straight. However, I can adjust this with my needle, my zigzag width. I'm on straight sew, so I can move that needle over further, and it'll give me a wider hem. Okay?
Yep.
And you can have anywhere in between by using that and having a nice straight edge. Okay? Take this off here. Sadie. Sadie, stop your growling. Stop your growling. Okay. Take this off. Regular foot. This one here is a rolled edge foot. And you put this down here. This takes a little practice. I recommend you check it out on YouTube and how to use it properly. But I'll just give you a general idea what you end up doing. Normally you'd sew a couple stitches, play around with it, but I'll just show it. You take your fabric, you run it into this groove here, right? And then what you're gonna do, I didn't start it right, and my take up is, I don't want my thread to pull out. You take this and you hold it like this, and it'll give you a rolled edge to it. There, that's what I want. Okay, it'll give you a nice clean edge. Oh yeah, you'll have to make sure your needle is back over on the other side. Okay, back straight down. And it'll roll over your fabric. It didn't there because my needle positioning was onto the left side. So let's try this again. Goes up, under, put it down, and it'll roll over. Okay? Goes up and over, and then you'll get this nice fine stitch. Okay? Sometimes you gotta watch it, how you stretch it and how you pull it to determine the curve. Take this one off, there's this one there, that one there, that one there. We explain this one, we'll go back to this normal one. And then you're a quilter, you'll like this next foot. Probably the best one of the lot that I recommend you can leave on all the time. And that's this little sewing guide. You take this guide and you have a hole in the back of the foot here. Okay, sorry, you got a hole in the back of the foot. You loosen this off. There we go. This thing slides in. You put this to wherever you want it to guide. Right? You take this, you put this down here, put this down here. Give me another piece of material. We'll do it. And then what we do is I use that as a guide, and it'll keep me nice and straight. It reverses here. Now if you want to make the exact same, you're doing a quilt and you want to make the exact same stitch line without marking your fabric, you just run it down that same line, and you'll get nice even spacings between the two.
Awesome.
Okay, like I say, you don't have to take this off. You could just move this over and tighten it up and keep it on your machine. However, get used to lifting up the foot with this hand opposed to this hand. You don't want to end up catching on it. Okay, and basically, okay, that's about it for the Decor
Thank you, sir.
5018. I'll
Love it.
get that out to you, and call Whitby Sewing. My sticker's on there. If you have any issues, you give me a call.
Thank you, sir.
Da da da.